175, with another 124 new positive cases reported over the last 24 hours, taking our total since March 12th to 33,153. Those recovered thus far are now standing at 25,554. Total active cases 6,733, with 866 deaths. Total persons in home isolation 6,106. Total persons in state quarantine 170, and those that stepped down 132. Minister Diasing will go into a little more detail in terms of the vaccinated population. Dr. Hines, if you want to come and give us the epidemiological update.
Thank you, CMO. Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Ministers, colleagues, members of the media, members of the viewing and listening public. The epidemiological update for the data updated as at 2 p.m. on July 2nd is as follows. At that date and time, we noted that there is that continuing downward trend that we've seen throughout the month of July, with the number of cases arranged by date of swab date when they presented to the health system, continuing to fall incrementally from day to day. So we're seeing that we're having progressively fewer cases being identified on a day-to-day basis throughout that month of June, and we're hoping that that trend continues. We look at how that looks on a weekly basis when we aggregate the data. The last week that was completed was week 25. And with the preliminary figures coming out of the lab, we expect that there'll be about a 20% decrease from the total last week to the total this week. So we've been seeing where from week 22 to week 23, 23 to week 24, 24 to 25, 25 to 26, we have had sequential decreases in the totals for the week. So this shows itself in the heights of those bars, the heights of those blue bars being progressively shorter from one week to the next, indicating fewer cases accumulating at the end of each week. The salmon section at the background is the positivity, and we see that that positivity for the week that we're currently in, the week that we're completing now, week 26, that positivity has fallen to about 27%, and going in that direction is considered to be a favorable trend. The smaller the percentage positivity, the happier we are that there are decreasing numbers of individuals in the population with circulating virus at this point in time. Looking at this over a monthly time scale, we see that the month of June concluded significantly lower than the month of May with respect to total numbers of cases. The new color on the right-hand side is that month of July, and the salmon section is now positivity aggregated over a monthly basis as opposed to a weekly. And we see that for the month of July, which is really only 2 days old in terms of data, we have a positivity of somewhere between 21 and 22%. The demographics for those who have tested positive throughout this time frame have remained largely the same, 50-50 in terms of percentage males and females, just about, and the majority of them being in that 25 to 49-year-old age group. Looking at the deaths, one of the things we noted is that there was a swing or a change from an overwhelming preponderance of men, where we were at 75% men to 25% women, and now we're just at about the 60-40 mark with regard to men versus women among the fatalities, with about 34 to 35% of those people being under 60 and the majority still being in the over 60 age group. Again, noting that most of these people would have had some form of comorbidity, but that there have been people without comorbidities who have also had fatal outcomes, and therefore we all need to continue to be careful. Looking at how the projections or extrapolations that we've done have borne out, we do see that those blue bars, which represent our daily cumulative totals, have basically kept track with the gray line, which is possibly just barely visible above the blue bars. And that gray line was the extrapolation of where we thought we might be gauging from the rate at which we were accumulating cases between June 3rd and June 17th. And we basically still stayed at more or less that rate. There's been a small decline, an incremental slowing, but not a very big change So we have seen that we've continued to slow, but maybe not particularly quickly. Another important measure or yardstick was that doubling time that we had indicated in May. We had reached another doubling point, and we'd gotten to that doubling point at about 41 days. It took 41 days to double from our total in April to that total on the 16th of May. And we thought at that point, at the speed at which we were going, that we may double again by the start or the first week in June. And that would have been a 21-day doubling time, but we've actually managed to slow that significantly, so that instead we've only met another doubling landmark 44 days later as opposed to 21 days. So again, just a yardstick showing that braking force was applied and that there has been some slowing of the rate of transmission, numbers of new cases, but we're not out of the woods yet, and we need to continue to apply the public health measures in order to continue that slowing trend. With that, I turn you over to Dr. Richards for the health system update.
Good afternoon to the Honourable Prime Minister, the Honourable Ministers of Health, National Security, Energy and the Office of the Prime Minister. Good afternoon to members of the media, the viewing and listening population of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you once again for joining us at our press conference. This afternoon, I'd like to provide a summary on the hospital levels in the parallel healthcare system, and that is across the 16 hospitals and step-down facilities that have approximately 1,000 beds. This information is as of 9 a.m. on the 3rd of July, 2021. The rolling average, that is the average number of cases per day over the last 7 days, is 197, and Dr. Hines would have gone into some detail on this matter previously. The gap between the admissions and discharges over the last week continues to remain very close and continues to narrow. And this is a positive indicator or sign because it translates into the availability of bed spaces and resources in the hospitals in the parallel healthcare system. That is, persons who require care have available resources in the hospitals in the system. The net admissions, we would have noted net admissions are the additional persons per day that require treatment in the system, continues to be more or less the same as of last week. We noted that compared to last week, there was slightly more admissions than the previous week, but the discharges were on or about the same. And overall, there were an additional 116 persons in the parallel healthcare system seeking care as compared to 112 last week. So that's fairly consistent. We also look at the total number of COVID-positive patients hospitalized in the parallel healthcare system, and those are across our 16 facilities. And as of this morning, the total number of patients is 496, with 371 in the hospitals and 125 in the step-downs, which of course are where the recovering patients go. Now, this means that although we are seeing less COVID-positive patients being treated in the parallel healthcare system, there is still a greater proportion of ill patients as compared to recovering patients. So there are still many ill patients within the system. The overall occupancy of the parallel healthcare system is less today. It is at 48%. And daily, we have, over the last week, we have noticed that the occupancy, that is how many persons are in the system as compared to the availability of beds and resources, continues to slowly decrease. So as of today, just under half of all the beds in the parallel healthcare system are occupied. If we look at the occupancies in Trinidad, where 90% of the beds are available, versus Tobago, we would notice a similar trend with a general and slow decrease in the occupancy of the beds. And at present, 51%, so just half of the beds in Trinidad and Tobago within the system have patients and are occupied, whereas in Tobago, it's at about 20%. We also examined the trends in the hospitals in the parallel healthcare system. And there are 9 hospitals in the parallel healthcare system where the critically ill patients go, those that require oxygen, ventilators, dialysis, and so on. And 7 of those are in Trinidad. And over the past 7 weeks or so, you would notice that the average occupancy, that is how filled these hospitals have been, continues to decrease. At present, the only hospital this week that was consistently above the critical level of 75% was the Augustus Long Hospital. You would notice that the Arima General Hospital, which was above that 75% line, has come down to just on or above the 75% threshold. And again, this is a positive sign or a positive indicator, which means that there are less patients requiring care in the parallel healthcare system, and the hospitals now have capacity to manage such patients. We treat patients at 3 levels of care in the parallel healthcare system: the ward level, where the least critical go, the high dependency units, and the intensive care units. And the majority of patients are in the ward level beds. And you would notice again that there has been a consistent but slow decline in the number or the occupancy of the patients in the ward level beds. Today we are at 45%. So approximately half of the ward level beds in Trinidad and Tobago are occupied with patients. Now, if you look in the box at the top, we have a statement of the ICU, where the most ill patients go, and the high dependency unit, where the next level of critically ill patients are managed. It is important to note that even though the ward level patients are decreasing in number and there is capacity to manage them, the ICUs and HDU level patients continue to be quite significant, meaning that we have a lot of ill patients still with COVID-19, and it really emphasizes the severity of this virus. One of the reasons the parallel healthcare system was set up was to protect the traditional healthcare system for non-COVID cases. And we continue to see a decline across the accident and emergency departments, where the COVID patients would initially be assessed when they are brought in by the ambulances from the community. This morning at the Eastern RHA, there were 2 COVID positive patients awaiting transfer. At the NWRHA in the Port of Spain General Hospital, only 7. The SWRHA at San Fernando, 5. And at the North Central Regional Health Authority, 5. And from the graphs, you would notice that this has been a general decline over the last week or so. Another area we look at would be the ambulance service. There was a spike on or around the 30th of June, but by and large, the 30% of all transfers in the ambulance service are for COVID patients, whether between hospitals or from home to hospital and so on. The average ambulance turnaround time, of course, it's longer for a COVID patient because of the increased precautions that have to be done with respect to sanitization and care, is on or around anywhere between 120 and 150 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, as I close, we have been noticing some very positive signs with respect to the level of care in the parallel healthcare system and the number of patients that are being managed. There has been a general decline in the number of persons who have to be admitted to the parallel healthcare system. However, this decline has been extremely slow, and at this point in time, we are working with the same staff, the same doctors and nurses who have been really working and giving selflessly over the last few months since there's been this recent uptake. The other factor that we must be very wary of is that the high dependency unit and the intensive care units continue to have many patients, and that really emphasizes how severe the COVID-19 virus is. With this in mind, on behalf of every frontline worker and volunteer who is now assisting us with our vaccination exercises and other activities in the national response to COVID-19, we would like to appeal to everyone to continue practicing the 3 W's. Please wear your mask, let's wash our hands, and let's watch our distance. We are confident and hopeful that if we continue along this path and add vaccination as an additional armor, we will be able to win this battle against COVID-19 and return to a sense of normalcy very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richards. At this stage, I'd like to ask the Minister of Health, Minister Terence Dale-Singh, to bring us up to date on the way the vaccination program is progressing and what the immediate plans are going forward.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister. Ministers Young and Hines, Dr. Parasram, Chief Medical Officer and his team, ladies and gentlemen of the media, and the listening and viewing public, wherever you are, good Saturday afternoon. So, as usual, I will give you a breakdown of where we are now. These are the figures as of last night. So the figures you see in the press releases are obviously a little bit earlier in the day. Total first dose administered throughout 5 RHAs, 4 in Trinidad, 1 in Tobago. State agencies, for example, oil and gas, and so on. Other agencies, these will be our public-private partnerships, Supermarket Association, Manufacturing Association, and so on. The grand total is 219,763 first doses. Our total second dose across the 5 RHAs and the state agencies, the other agencies are actually starting their second dosing today. So you won't see any figures as of last night for it. Today, I'll just give you an outline. This weekend, the intention is to give second doses between Supermarket Association, Pharmacy Board, Construction, Manufacturing, and CPEP, about 16,200. So next week, Saturday, you wouldn't see a dash there again. You would see a very good figure on the other agencies. So total second dose as of last night, 105,586. The second graph, or the next graph here, the next diagram, shows you where we are. The horizontal purple line, as you know, is our immediate goal based on vaccines we have had and continue to have in stock. The goal was to have 188,900 persons fully vaccinated by July 31st, 2021. The green line, 219,763. You will see the green line has gone above the purple horizontal line because we are still continuing our first dosing, albeit, as you will see, at a slower pace. So we still continue our first dose. The line of interest, and as you want, I think that we all pay attention to, is the aquamarine or bluey line, which shows you second dose. We want that blue line to touch the horizontal purple line. To date, 105,586 persons have received their second dose. So hopefully we are on target to meet our goal of 188,900 with 2 doses by the end of July. That is where we are, and that is where we are going with this first goal. I just want to give an update and give you some more detailed figures on 2 key groups. In speaking to my colleague in Tobago this morning, the Secretary for Health, Wellness and Family Services, the Honorable Tracy Davison Celestin, and also speaking to Ms. Carolyn Ruiz, who is the President of the Trinidad and Tobago Residential Care Association, we are concerned about 2 groups, and I'm going to give you the figures so you can judge for yourself where we are. The healthcare system in Trinidad and Tobago has roughly about 16,600 healthcare workers. To date, we have vaccinated 8,861 of those, so roughly about 50%. This figure, and I am supporting my colleague in Tobago, we need to get this up to about 12,000. So we need about 4,000 more healthcare workers to come out and be vaccinated. All 5 RHAs will be going on another drive again to get more and more healthcare workers vaccinated. Whilst 8,861 may sound good, it could be a lot better, especially as these individuals work in close conjunction with COVID-positive patients. So across the 5 RHAs, we are appealing to healthcare workers. We need about 4,000 more to come out and be vaccinated, and we'll be assisting to get these vaccines out to you. Another issue facing both islands, and again, talking to my colleague in Tobago and Ms. Caroline Ruiz, is the challenges we continue to face in our long-stay homes, where the elderly, especially those with dementia, Alzheimer's, and so on. To date, we have been able to vaccinate 1,143 persons in these facilities across both islands. However, when you break it down, it translates into 803 residents and 340 caregivers, which makes sense because you want the caregivers to be a firewall. However, we continue to face challenges in getting the appropriate authorization from next of kin or guardians. We are again appealing to next of kin, children, guardians, those with legal authority to make the decision to please let us have the consent to have these elderly patients vaccinated, because we cannot vaccinate them against their free will. We must have that informed consent. And we wouldn't like one of these homes to really be a crucible for COVID-19. So whenever we make the appeal at this platform, we do get some uplift in the number of permissions. So again, we are appealing both on behalf of Trinidad, and as I said, I spoke to my colleague in Tobago this morning, and I spoke to Caroline Ruiz of the association. We really need consent to vaccinate persons in our long-stay homes. The Prime Minister indicated that I should give you an idea of where we are going with our COVID-19 vaccination drive. At the Ministry of Health, we are being very proactive in mapping out our future plans for vaccinating more and more of the population above and beyond the initial target that I have just described, because more and more vaccines will come into the country. Our plans are broke down into the following groups. Tobago, they have asked for, and they will receive an additional 10,000. URP and CPEP will be singled out. We want to vaccinate the prison population, which is about 3,000 persons. Minister Hines and I are working together with that. But National Security will get a total of about 6,000 doses. 3,000 for their prison population, but also their prison officers, immigration, and so on. We are singling out also public transport, taxi drivers and maxi taxi drivers. We have allocated 5,000 for that. I'm working with the Minister of Works and Transport on that. I am also working with the Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries. We are allocating 10,000 to everybody in the agricultural sector. Farmers, vendors, fisherfolk. Ministry of Education, another 5,000 for teachers. In general, for other ministries, 20,000. And assuming we get vaccines in large enough numbers, we are now going to move to all 109 health centers throughout Trinidad and Tobago to make access much easier. 100,000 has been allocated for that in the first instance. Other sectors. You are familiar with the sectors we have been vaccinating: manufacturing, supermarkets, and so on. We'll now be expanding that. We are singling out the food and beverage industry 20,000 has been allocated for that. Janitorial staff, these are people working for janitorial companies. These are frontliners, 5,000. Tertiary institutions like UE, UTT, COSTAT, and private tertiary institutions, 20,000 allocated. We'll be singling out the clergy of all religions, 2,000. Banks and credit unions, we would have done 2,000 for banks already. We are now expanding it now to include credit unions, 5,000. We are going to do a deeper dive into supermarkets and distribution with another 15,000. The pharmacy industry, another 2,000 on top of the 1,000 we already did. And a nice innovation, we would have singled out again the Diabetes Association with an initial target of 1,000. We are now expanding that to include the Diabetes Association and the coalition of NCDs. So it's not only restricted to diabetes, but there's a coalition of NCDs that will bring their persons and patients to us, 5,000. Manufacturing, already on the cards, but they will be getting an additional 5,000. Construction, an additional 10,000. Our special groups, the persons, adults with autism, cerebral palsy, the blind, the deaf, the autoimmune, the handicapped, we have allocated, based on the numbers the associations have given us, 2,000. Funeral homes, persons who work with the deceased, they are particularly vulnerable, between 500 to 1,000, those were the figures we got. And for the first time, as we add all 109 health centers, for the first time we are now adding 64 what we call Sentinel Physicians. These are private practitioners who work with the Ministry of Health to monitor and administer vaccines in our current vaccination drive, whether it's for flu, MMR, or whatever. These are private physicians, about 7 per county. So between the 109 health centers and these 64 Sentinel physicians in the private sector, we are allocating about 15,000 to these 64 Sentinel physicians. So we are making plans to vaccinate about 300,000 persons in the shortest possible space of time. That means we have to ramp up our mass vaccination sites. We are all familiar with the mass vaccination sites we have at the UTT Monroe Road, the Paddock Racket Center. We opened a new one in Sangre Grande, the Civic Center, Mayaro Sporting Center, and Sapa. We are going to deepen our relationship with the private sector by bringing on 6 new mass vaccination sites, but with a twist. We are now engaging the service clubs like Rotary. Rotary will be providing us with a lot of manpower and or woman power as they see fit to help man these sites. And through the Chamber of Commerce, the Trinidad Chamber of Commerce, we are also working with them to get companies to adopt a site. They will help us with matters like IT, data entry, and so on. What we will do, again, is provide the vaccines, provide all the consumables, the vaccination cards, and so on. So we are taking another innovative approach to bring vaccines as close as possible to where you are in your communities. And this innovation with Rotary and the business sector will see 6 new sites. 1, the Diego Martin Sporting Complex in Diego Martin, which intersects 3 Diego Martin constituencies, Diego Martin West, Diego Martin Northeast, and Diego Martin Central. One of the reasons for choosing these 6 sites, and these 6 sites are dedicated to these groups I just described, maxi taxis and so on, is that they have the capacity to do about 1,500 to 2,000 shots per day. So there's going to be one in Diego Martin, We'll be activating Napa. We'll be activating one site in Tunapuna. We are doing a site visit there on Monday, so I can't give you the name as yet. We are activating UTT in Corinth, the Penal Power Generation Facility. And I want to thank the Point Lisas, Couva Point Lisas Chamber of Commerce building. We'll be utilizing that building in Couva. So those are 6 sites, new sites, that will join the Diwali Nagar and the Supermarket Association. So these 6 new sites and the 2 existing sites will be to vaccinate these groups that we have identified. So maxi taxi drivers, farmers, fisher folk, all these will go to these new sites. Food and beverage will go to these new sites. But the public will be serviced through the Sentinel Physicians and the 109 health centers throughout the country. So it's a very equitable way of distributing vaccines. We are being very proactive, and we want to vaccinate another 300,000 persons in the shortest possible space of time. So, Honorable Prime Minister, that is where we are. That is where we are going. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Minister Dayal Singh. A little later on, I'll ask Dr. Trotman to tell us a little bit about what's happening inside the hospital. And before I do that, let me just take the opportunity to thank the entire health team that has taken us to this position. Ladies and gentlemen, having heard from the Minister of Health, you would come to a conclusion like that I have, that we are in a much better position now than we were earlier in the year. You may recall that the international vaccination program started in countries in January, thereabouts. A few countries started in December and opened the program. But January and February was when there was the first rush for vaccines. And you would have not forgotten the behavior of some people here in the country demanding that the government vaccinate the population. There was only one difficulty with that, in that the vaccines were not available. And you would have also remember that we, from day one, all of us, wherever we are, whoever we are, in the response and understanding of this virus, we saw the light at the end of the tunnel, or escape from this tunnel, and getting back to some economic activity and proceeding with our lives with some semblance of normalcy. That we needed to have a population that was vaccinated, and therefore in that population the virus should subside, and if it did infect people, the purpose of the vaccines, as shown by the scientific community, was that it would allow us to not get too sick, not requiring too much hospitalization, and reducing the level of mortality in the population. We all agreed on that. But the issue was getting our hands on the vaccine. That is and has remained an international problem. And I don't know very many heads of governments who are not focused on that issue, even where vaccines are available, because the story of the vaccines change all the time, availability, efficacy, and so on and so on. In the CARICOM, you also would recall that Trinidad and Tobago assumed the chairmanship of CARICOM in January, exactly at the time when this issue of vaccines for the population, vaccines for life, was the primary issue in front of us. We had our first head of government meeting, which I chaired in 2021, in January, and the vaccination program that was required, the vaccines to be obtained, was the main issue at that heads of government meeting. And at the end of that meeting, a release was made from the content of that discussion, those discussions, and it was a public statement issued from CARICOM to the world about our concern that the vaccination program, even as early as that, we were concerned that there could have been inequity in the vaccine production and distribution, which would have allowed people like us, small island developing states or middle income, low income countries, not to have reasonable and fair access. At that time, the only finger we had on the pulse was by November before, we had joined into this COVAX, which was a multinational understanding organized by the WHO, where all countries like ours and most of the countries of the world, except the few who thought that they could stand on their own, the big and wealthy ones, about almost 200 countries got together and said, we'll take part in this COVAX mechanism where the initial amount of vaccines that you will get, 20% of the population, you could look to this mechanism, but the other 80% you'll have to find in the normal marketplace. That marketplace, ladies and gentlemen, has up to now not come about. And the COVAX supplies have not been fully delivered. You may recall that we told you we got 2 shipments. They were delayed. The first one was delayed well beyond the initial time it should have been distributed. We got 33,600. That was our first non-gift vaccine. And then later on we got a second one, and we're still waiting on a third one. And that brings me to the point that that third one is due later in July. Do you have a date yet, Minister? 14th of July, we expect to get our final batch of the COVAX amount, which initially we thought we'll get a bit earlier. But by the middle of July, we should get that 33,000, and that would complete our COVAX commitment at the moment. In the meantime, some of the larger countries, the countries in the G7, have committed to make more vaccines available through this COVAX mechanism. But until that is done, all we have so far is a promise that they will make more vaccines available through the COVAX. Had we been relying entirely on that COVAX volume, all that would have happened to us here in Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension the CARICOM, except for a small number of gifts we got, was that we would have had only the 2. And even as I speak to you now, this minute, I'm just advised that the third shipment that I just mentioned that is due on the 14th, it is now delayed until August. So we cannot expect any more vaccines through the COVAX mechanism. So we'll still have to wait with our 2/3 that they gave us. The last 1/3, as of now, has been delayed until August. That symbolizes the vaccine acquisition arrangements that we've been living with. That is quite disappointing. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I can advise you that committing to vaccinating the population as quickly as possible, and to do so with only WHO vaccines. We have, fortunately, a steady stream out of China, which is the WHO-approved Sinopharm vaccine, of which we already have had in our possession 300,000. We had 100,000 gift up front. Much of what the minister told you there in his presentation was from the first purchase from China. And we have now a substantial shipment, a fairly large shipment coming in starting next week. Enough vaccines should arrive here next week, which will allow the Minister of Health to do what he said there. Vaccines will be available to do the program that the minister outlined. So we'll be on an aggressive program to vaccinate by first dose all those people who the minister has invited to be vaccinated in those subsectors of the national population. And if you recall what they were, clearly we would make a huge dent in the vaccination program. So by the end of, during the month of July, that program should be going at full speed ahead. And we are in a position now to tell the national population that once you get your first dose in the minister's program that was just outlined, you're guaranteed to get a second dose. Because the science is telling us, and every day, every month, we are getting more and more information on the program in the world. Without your 2 doses, you're not fully vaccinated, you're not fully covered. First dose alone does not do it and will not do it. It will introduce some level of immunity, but it is not high enough for you to take any comfort in. When you get your second dose, it moves from an efficacy from down 60% to up as high as 90, 92% or thereabouts. So if you only had 1 dose, please go when you are invited to or when the time comes to get your second dose, and that is what you're boosted up now to the full benefit of the vaccination program. And we are now saying to you, in the weeks ahead, in the program the minister has outlined, that we should have in our hand enough vaccine to drive that program, first dose into second dose. And that is from a supply stream coming from Asia. We also have a commitment with our initial payment made, as I told you at an earlier time from this podium. We teamed up with the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, and that huge group of 50 African countries contracting hundreds, I think about 700 million doses of vaccine, and all that goes with that in terms of the difficulty of getting vaccines. I can tell you that we are committed in that program, Trinidad and Tobago, for 800,000 doses, and CARICOM, a larger volume for the CARICOM. As I leave the CARICOM chair on Monday I hand over to the Prime Minister of Antigua, who will take chairmanship of CARICOM. I can report that between January and last Wednesday, virtually all of my chairman's effort in CARICOM was on vaccines for the nations of CARICOM. And during this month of July, we are expecting an improvement in the forecast that we had made, because initially I told you that the vaccines that we were going to get from the African purchase would have been coming here towards the end of August. I have had significant conversations with the head of this effort in Africa, President Ramaphosa of South Africa, where the vaccine is being produced now, and he has given me the commitment that whatever Africa produces, CARICOM will get a portion of it. Subsequent meetings with the leaders of that program, as late as yesterday, I had confirmation that that situation is very positive at the moment, and the first shipment to CARICOM would be here not in August, but in July. So towards the middle of July, we expect to get our first shipment, CARICOM, approximately 800,000 doses coming in. And of that 800,000 doses, Trinidad and Tobago is expected to get just under 200,000 of it. And we expect to get another 400,000 in August and another 500,000 in September for CARICOM. So that means that from that source in Africa, we should be getting a fairly steady stream of vaccines to keep our program going and making us more comfortable and getting us closer to the point at which we could say that our population is approaching, or by the end of the year, certainly at herd immunity. So that's the second stream. The third stream is the statements made by the United States government and the conversations we've had with all the authorities there. That has progressed considerably, but it has not changed since I spoke to you last. When I spoke to you last, I told you that decisions were made, documentation was signed. So far, the release of the order to release the vaccines from that source has not yet come. There have been one or two little hiccups there, which we are hoping day by day would disappear, and that the order for the release of the vaccines that would come to us from the United States offer, that they will come. So that's another line of vaccine. And of course, we continue to look at the market to see whether vaccines are available for purchase. However, to talk about Trinidad and Tobago specifically, where our population is a population of 1.4 million people, we are expecting that we have about 900,000 people to vaccinate if every person volunteers to be vaccinated. You know what that means. Those of you know your friends and your family who have other ideas. But we are hoping that the large majority of people will see the need to get vaccinated, because when we get up to, I think that the figure we're looking at is about 700,000 persons to be, persons, not doses, persons to be vaccinated. And we do not know how many of those persons will not choose to be vaccinated for reasons known to them, for whatever the reason is, whether it is because of their medical condition, their mistrust of the vaccine, whatever it is. But though that is where we're aiming to go. And at this point in time, we are on track to do that as we move towards July, August, September. And we simply would ask the population to cooperate. If the vaccines are available, be vaccinated and get your second shot once the second shot is required. We did tell you the vaccines that are coming from Africa would be a one-shot vaccine, but it's not going to be here immediately. Before that, you're going to have the two-shot vaccine. There's also the scientific discussion that the two-shot vaccine is more efficacious, and that it may be that in the not too distant future, the one-shot vaccine may have to have a booster with it. Or we also hear in the discussion that you may be able to first dose with one vaccine. And let us all not play doctors and not play scientists. Let us be guided by the wider support that we're getting from the WHO. And the most recent one, we've seen WHO being specific that, yes, you could take AstraZeneca and Pfizer as first and second. Now, this in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have any more AstraZeneca in line until August when we get some COVAX. We have no Pfizer in hand. So let us go with what we got. And when we get the Johnson & Johnson, by that time, it may still be one dose, or quite possible, it can become a two-dose situation. And I was talking to one of the leaders of the African program yesterday who tells me that he was just about to get his third dose, because third dosing is taking place in the vaccination program, because the scientists are seeing that persons who have been vaccinated and revaccinated are getting a good immune response. So this is a moving target, but we'll live with it as we go forward. So that is the picture, ladies and gentlemen, with respect to the vaccination program. I'm very happy to hear the minister say that very soon, during the month of July, we will, and by mid-July, we will be using all our health centers to provide vaccines and our community physicians. Once we are in that situation, we would have broken the back of the vaccination challenge, because the supply is now within sight and within reach, and the infrastructure in the Ministry of Health is there to get it into your arms. And all we ask for is cooperation with the population. And a fully vaccinated population is our best response to this virus. And we will then go out to do all the things we normally do. But of course, bearing in mind that there are other things we need to do to keep protecting ourselves from the virus. The first thing being, try and avoid being infected. Because what the vaccine does not prevent you from being infected. What it holds out to the population is that if you get infected, that you will respond better and stand a much better chance of not being a casualty. But it doesn't mean that once you get vaccinated, you will go and be irresponsible. You will still require to be aware that you can be infected, that there are infected people around, and the response to that is you will still be required to do some distancing, and we will still be wearing masks for a while, and we would still, as we should be, sanitizing as completely as we can our person as well as the environments and surfaces we touch. But I'll ask Dr. Chotman after to talk to that issue of it. So let us get to where we are with respect to responding to our condition. I must say, we could have been in a much worse position than we are today. We're not in the best position, but we are in a reasonably good position. We've turned around the huge dangers we had in early June, but we still have challenges ahead. Do not relax the protocols. It's a life and livelihood matter. So I want to turn now a little bit to the livelihood side of it. You would have seen during the week, just before the children came out on Thursday, I think it was Tuesday evening, we changed the concentration of people in a public vehicle to 1 per window, and that is now in place. So public transportation is now operating at approximately 75%, and that is going to bring a bit of relief to those who make a living in there, and also provide the public transport for the rest of the population that needs the public transport, and no more so than those persons in the construction sector. Last week, I did say that we would open up government construction this Monday. We looked at it very closely, looked at the reaction and the management of that and the logistics of it, and we looked at the situation in the hospitals, situation with the numbers of infected people. And today I'm in a position to tell you that on Monday, we would allow all construction. So if your business is construction, you would be allowed to resume your construction program. If you are working in construction, you'd be allowed to go back out to work. And let me at this point remind everybody again, I'm talking here now about thousands of people who will now be allowed to come out and go back to the normal day's work. Please be careful. Please wear your mask. Sanitization is a must, and avoid congregation as far as you are able to. And that congregation would hardly take place on the job site where you're working. It is likely to take place when you move to go and make a line together to talk up in somebody's face. Please avoid that. Continue to regard the next person as an infected person, and to regard yourself as an infected person. And with that in mind, you'd be able to come out, go to work, do some work, earn some money to feed your family. The government's program has been there, but that could not be as a replacement. We try to help as far as we're able to, and you would have seen the logistical difficulties. So you're in construction, you come back out to work on Monday, but please, like everybody else, be careful. We are in a pandemic. So that's construction, all construction, and the businesses associated with construction, where we identified some of them last week, the businesses that supply the construction. You can come out on Monday and do your business. So from Monday, that sector, the population. Now, that is at the expense of other sectors which are still closed. And I understand your exhortation, I understand your complaints, but we are hoping that we continue to go in the same direction that you heard today. And very soon, we should be able to add those people in the service sector. I'm anticipating that we should be able, if we continue along the path that Dr. Hines has pointed us to and which the numbers point us to, if we continue on that downward path with no alarm, we should be able to turn and pay some attention to cautiously reopening the service sector, especially, I know the one that is most out front, which is the food service sector, and we have not forgotten you, we're not ignoring you, we're just doing it step by step as carefully as possible, because what we're doing here now is significant opening up. it would have many, many more people coming out and moving about. And once that is happening, the chances of the virus getting away there. Read the news and you would see people with far more vaccines and far more resources than we have, who thought that they had vaccinated themselves away from the virus. They continue to have challenges here and there, and in some cases, the challenges are very serious. So if as we go out now, we start to see a return to numbers that are dangerous, it wouldn't be the first time in the world, but it would require us to respond. And we hate to have to respond by this up and down arrangement. If we are a small community, 1.4 million people, it is possible to manage this in a way that the virus doesn't keep forcing us to do certain things. Now, we will also, well, our children have had the SEA exams. I'm very grateful to all those who guided that program, the Ministry of Education staff. I want to thank the minister and her team, the teachers, the supervisors, the volunteers, all those. We have successfully got the exam done. We'll now wait on the results, and we are in a position now to designate our children to high school in September. So that's the way. And while I'm talking to you now, the other children are doing the exams. They will continue to do that until the middle of July, I think it is. And so those exam children continue to do your work. Parents continue to take care of them, get them in and get them out as quickly as possible. And let's get the exams out of the way. So after that, we're going to look forward to September. And given what I said about the vaccine becoming available, the vaccination program that the minister has outlined, we expect that all things being equal and reasonable, that the children could look forward to school in September, and that would be a huge relief. And laundromats, we are going to allow laundry services. And of course, I know a lot of people have their laundry to do. Please do not now convert the laundry. Laundries are normally very small spaces. Don't go and congregate there and catch COVID in the laundromat. It is quite possible to go there, take your laundry in, and so on, and take it out, bearing in mind that you go masked, keep away from crowds, get your laundry done, and of course the laundry staff. Minister, you would have gotten vaccinated, if you wish. So we're going to have open laundries as of Monday. And the other one I want to talk about is the promise we made about opening our border to international traffic on or about the 17th of, as of today, we're using the 17th of July. I would like at this stage to ask Dr. Parasram to go through the conditions for entry, since the CMO's office is the authority on what goes on in this matter, lay out the conditions for entry through the port. And while Dr. Parasram is getting ready, I would say we have two international airports in this country, one in Trinidad, one in Tobago. Let me just say that to enter Trinidad and Tobago, there will be conditions laid down at Piarco, and there will be conditions laid down at A.N. Robinson in Tobago. The difference is that in Tobago, we will not allow unvaccinated nationals to enter the country through Tobago. Unvaccinated nationals, if you are such, you will have to enter through Piarco. And if you are not a national, you will not enter at all as an unvaccinated person. So Dr. Parasram, can you take it from there, please?
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. So this is the reopening of the borders quarantine protocols for Trinidad and Tobago. So again, we go back to the definition, which is the cornerstone of vaccinated versus unvaccinated persons. A fully vaccinated individual is considered so 2 weeks after having or receiving the final recommended vaccine dose or doses of a WHO-approved vaccine. The approved vaccines to date from WHO are Pfizer-BioNTech, AstraZeneca Oxford, Janssen, which is the Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Sinopharm of the Beijing plant, and Sinovac CoronaVac. So the categories, passengers from all countries, we broke it into 3 categories. So you have the first category, unvaccinated individuals, and just a note there, this category applies to nationals only. You require a PCR test 72 hours prior to arrival, which will be validated by the airline. Immediately after arrival, you go into state-supervised quarantine for 14 days, medical assessment within 24 hours of arrival, daily monitoring, and a COVID-19 PCR test done on the 7th day of your quarantine. Asymptomatic passengers who test negative are allowed to go home after the quarantine period, and passengers who test positive are immediately transferred into the parallel healthcare system based on your acuity of the disease at the point in time. Just to note, asymptomatic passengers testing negative on day 7 still have to complete the 14-day period within the designated facility. Retaining passengers requiring immediate medical attention, whether it be coming in by air ambulance or becoming critically ill while at the quarantine site, they will be allowed to go to any quarantine hospital where they get care. These are non-COVID positive, so they will go to possibly another facility, have their care. If it is less than the 14 days and you're well, you can go back to the facility thereafter. Stable patients being transferred back to the state-supervised quarantine facility. Passengers who test positive for COVID-19 upon arrival or during quarantine are again transferred into a facility at the parallel healthcare system. Fully vaccinated passengers. PCR test 72 hours prior to arrival. Proof of vaccination, WHO approved vaccine. No quarantine required. Category 4, children. So unvaccinated children traveling with a vaccinated parent or guardian are allowed home with the following conditions: a PCR test 72 hours prior to arrival, repeat of the PCR test between days 3 and 5 of arriving into the country, which will be required to, that test is to be sent to the office of the county medical officers of health at the various counties. Of course, if you're positive at that time, you'll be isolated, contact tracing will be started. Any unvaccinated adult traveling with a child will go to state-supervised quarantine as per Category 1. Unvaccinated children traveling without a vaccinated parent or guardian will also go to Category 1, which is state-supervised quarantine for the 14-day period. Prime Minister, that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parasram, and that is the condition under which the board is open. And let me just repeat what I just said, because I know that some people take a little while to hear it clearly. The opening of the borders, and I'm talking about the airport, Piarco Airport, open to nationals who are fully vaccinated and unvaccinated. The fully vaccinated would not require quarantine as long as they meet the conditions just outlined by the CMO. If you are a national and you enter, as you must, through Piarco, you will be required to go into that 14-day of state supervision, the unvaccinated person, and that is for your own account. You got to pay for that quarantine. And Tobago, if you're a national, an international flight coming into Tobago, you're a national, fully vaccinated, you can enter through Tobago. If you are a non-national and fully vaccinated, you can also enter Tobago. If you are not vaccinated and you are non-national, you cannot enter Trinidad and Tobago at this time. And I just to clear up again, I just said construction and associated businesses. That includes hardware supplies, hardware and supply stores, supplying construction, and it also includes quarries. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the adjustments we've made. Thankfully, we are able to make those adjustments now. We delayed much of it for a little while, waiting for things to get a little better. Things have got a little better, but not perfect. Let us not use this easing to create an environment that will force us to have to respond in a way that none of us want. And if that comes upon us, bear in mind that in 2021, we cannot shut the virus out. We are being called upon to live with the virus. And the operative word there is live. One of the reasons why we are still doing what we are doing is that we are keeping our eyes on those variants, one of which is very deadly. It's not in our country as yet, but it is quite likely that somewhere along the way, that Delta virus might get into our country. If it does, let it meet a responding population that is hugely alert to the dangers that the virus poses. As a matter of fact, what we're seeing with this virus is what has been seen historically with viruses in an earlier era, where the later waves are more deadly and more dangerous because the virus would have mutated to a more efficient entity, and the population would have been weakened for a number of reasons, not the least of which, as the history will show, the weakened diet of the population, or people have been weakened for having not gone through certain kinds of normal arrangements. So when the virus returns, whether it's the second, the third, or the fourth wave, historically it has shown that it has been very deadly. That's where the world is right now with that Delta virus. And we need to be aware of that. We are not saying that we can lock the border down and it doesn't come here. The virus is with us in all its forms. That's how we have to look at it. Because until we get a confirmation that somebody has the Delta, we don't know that it's not here until it is confirmed. It might very well be here, but we haven't picked it up yet. And the first time we'll know is when the first person is picked up. So let us be alert to the existence of it around. That's why we're being strict. And tonight I'm going to ask the Attorney General to look at the penalties that exist for breaches of those quarantine and entry requirements. And if they are not sufficiently stringent, we will strengthen them, because that, now that we are doing this, compliance with those guidelines is a must. And any person who figure they're smarter than the rest of us in the country and try to beat them, you must expose yourself to serious penalties if you do that. Too much is at stake. Just too much is at stake. And therefore, I'm asking for cooperation, because we are going to be firm and we are going to be cooperative. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we'll take them now.
Prime Minister, in opening the borders, are we opening as well the sea borders? Because there are yachties fully vaccinated, I hope.
Sorry?
Yachties.
Yachties?
Yes, wanting to come into Trinidad.
Well, if we open if we open access to Trinidad and Tobago, it's just, that's how you enter the country. Where if you come by boat or by plane, that is the condition. So if you want to eliminate the inconvenience, there's a way of doing that, which is to be fully vaccinated, right, on the terms laid down by the CMO, right? So anybody coming through here would have to comply with that. Of course, logistically, it's a little different if you're coming by boat as if you're coming by plane. It's a little different. We will take a decision separate and apart from that about cruise ships. That's a separate decision as to whether a cruise ship, which brings a large number of people at any one time, and that is going to be taken in the context of gatherings and quick mixing of the population. So that decision has not yet been taken about cruise ships. That's a separate decision. So I'm glad you mentioned that question.
What was the reasoning for not allowing unvaccinated nationals to enter through Tobago?
Because we want to make sure that, one, we preserve Tobago. It being a separate entity, it is possible to preserve a lower level of exposure in Tobago. And two, the logistics of managing unvaccinated people. The government is not prepared to take on that in 2 airports when we could do it well in 1. Because if you're coming unvaccinated, it's a whole operation to deal with you. Right? And that involves having and using transportation from the immigration officer to a hotel, to manage you at the hotel, and so on. So we are relieving Tobago of that burden at this point in time, and we have 1 entry into the country.
When you say relieving the burden, I know Tobago tourism sector suffered a lot. With the state supervised quarantine, hotels are used.
Yeah, so, I hear that, but we are not going to relieve ourselves of that suffering by inviting unvaccinated people inside there, because the second case will be worse than the first. Right? Even though we love to have tourists come to Tobago in large numbers, at this point in time, unvaccinated tourists are unwelcome.
I have a few more, but I'll let my colleagues go and come.
To sort of Lala TDT News, to the Minister, is there any move to vaccinate cabin crews? I know the borders are reopening cabin crews with the Caribbean Airlines, other airlines, and so on.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, many of them have already been vaccinated, and we can vaccinate more. I just want to address one issue, because I got a WhatsApp from a reporter about the use of Sentinel Physicians in the private sector, and whether those persons will have to pay for their vaccines. The answer is no. Sentinel Physicians, on the register of the Ministry of Health, is an old, tried and tested program dating back decades. They agreed to work with us, free of charge, to surveil what is circulated in the community, whether it's meningitis, any public health disease or issue. And in that program, they have always been giving out vaccines to the population free of charge. Nowhere in this program that we have outlined will any member of the public have to pay for vaccination. So I really thank that reporter who sent in the question, because it gives me an opportunity to clarify the issue.
And secondly, now that the construction sector is being opened up, hardwares, are they going to be opened still?
Yeah.
Yes. Hardwares and associated supply stores, the paint store, doors, roofing, those are all, we can consider all those to be integrally part of the construction sector.
Prime Minister Joshua Simongo from Guardian Media. You said your target is 700,000 vaccinated people. Is there a definitive date or an estimated date for that? And the Minister of Health listed a number of sectors that he aims to vaccinate. 5,000, I think it's 20,000 in the food sector.
Yeah.
Is it that program goes to, as intended, the food sector? We can say that sector will be open definitively by that date, upon completion of that vaccination program?
I'm not going to answer that question the way you want me to answer it. Because, wait, because if I give you a date, that we're going to do that on so-and-so date, and on that date, Dr. I.A.N says that we have got 500 people more, or Dr. Maran Richards tells us the hospitals are full, and so we have to keep that in mind. So all we can give you are indicative periods. We know, like I just said to you, by the middle of July, we have a date when we expect a shipment to arrive. That could change. And I know what you do when the date changes. But you did say you're going to make it on that day. Let's not go down that road. I think I'm giving you enough information date-wise. I can't give you a date when we would have vaccinated the 700,000 person. We are aiming to do that. If we receive our vaccines on time on the dates that we have, if the program of vaccination, which involves people saying, yes, vaccinate me, all of that is required for us to get to a date when that figure of whatever it is, whether it's 600,000, 700,000, 800,000, that is a ballpark figure, a ballpark area. But a lot of the success of arriving on that involves people wanting to be vaccinated. So I can't give you a date when that would be. Huh?
Would you say it's fair to say most people in those sectors there be some degree of willingness to get back out of work, so they'd be interested in getting vaccinated?
I can't answer that. I mean, since the vaccination is a volunteering of the person to be vaccinated, and what I'm saying, from the government's platform, we will make the vaccines available. And we'll encourage you to take them because we know that we are all better off for every person who could be vaccinated to be vaccinated. So I can't go further than that.
Prime Minister, with that in mind, wouldn't it be reasonable then to put initiatives for persons to get vaccinated? When I say initiative, incentives, sorry, not initiative.
Well, yes. Well, we will make every effort to encourage people to get vaccinated. But the biggest initiative is saving your own life. And that is there.
For example, Prime Minister, we have 105,000 fully vaccinated people. Are there any plans to give special privileges to these people who have been fully vaccinated? Let's say outdoor exercise, or they can...
And how will you manage that? Because that would mean stopping everybody and asking them, I see you outside, are you vaccinated?
They can walk with their car, Prime Minister.
Joshua, we have enough work to do. There will come a time when the physical conditions in the country will allow that, and we will do that. But if we go and get down to that level of granularity, you will give yourself an assignment that you can't carry out. And that is when you'll come and say that the government doing foolishness. And I know you'll want to say that.
Prime Minister, but a lot of mental health experts are making the claim that there's a mental health crisis at this time. And
the mental health expert operates in the same Ministry of Health. The mental health experts in the Ministry of Health are the same group of healthcare workers who tell us to keep the program we have until they tell us change the program. Yes, there are mental health issues. Yes, there were serious issues and still are issues with our children not being able to go to school. But there's a bigger problem. And the problem is there's an infection we have to try and evade. So that is the priority number one. And then we take caution coming forward in allowing more and more people to come out and more people to mix as we vaccinate more and more people. That is the program in this country.
Speaking to a number of heads of NGOs, they are saying they've never seen the level of socioeconomic suffering that the country is in currently, especially in poorer communities.
Neither have I. But is there anybody alive in Trinidad and Tobago today that has ever seen a pandemic? Well, right. We are functioning in a pandemic, so it is no news to say I've never seen it before.
But some critics are saying the government is not fully aware or is out of touch with those realities. And they point
Joshua, are you saying that?
No, not me, Prime Minister.
What are you saying?
And
what are you saying?
Some of those critics point to the statement made by Minister Donna Cox, who was asked after there was a long line seen in San Fernando. If I'm quoting her correctly, she said there are some in need and there are some in greed. Do you stand by that statement? Some people look at that statement as insensitive.
I stand by the statement. Why should I stand? That's not my statement. Why should I stand by it? And what the minister said has been properly explained by the minister. You may or may not accept it. Repeating it 1,000 times didn't change it. The minister explained what she said. You might say she shouldn't have said it. I might not have said it. You might not have said it. But it has been explained. So why am I going to spend my evening talking about that again?
Some people point to that and say that shows our level of
and such a person, if before that statement was made, would that person have said that the government is in touch and, or would you continue? They were that view before. It is not that statement that makes the people that you are referring to. It is not that statement that makes that person say that the government is out of touch. That was being said before by persons who want to say that. I could tell you one thing. This government has gone further than most governments in the world in responding to this pandemic. Understand that? Okay?
Prime Minister, what was the reasoning behind opening the construction sector first? You hinted at the service sector maybe next. We're hearing the laundromats will be open on Monday as well. What was the reasoning for these particular sectors? And also, what will be the next sector? And if you could give us a sort of a listing of your rolling out.
No, I can't do that. I can't do that today because it is all rooted in moving out a block of people, and the reasoning behind is that it allows a large number of people to relatively safely go back out to their livelihood in a way that will allow them to not depend too much on the government, get the work done. Being in the outdoors, there's some positivity of that. Working in the outdoors, once you have your mask on and so on, is a little safer than working on the indoors. And then, of course, if we are going to do the management of people in blocks and not everybody come out at one time, whoever comes out will leave some in, and eventually they will all come out. Right? Because once you have to choose, who is chosen will be deemed to have been preferenced, and who was not chosen to come out will say, why not me? And the only answer to that, to not have that, is to let everybody come out at one time, and then you will say the government is irresponsible.
Now, with the opening of the borders, would flights be limited to CAL or other airlines be allowed to?
No, CAL is only one airline coming in and out of Trinidad and Tobago. If you had seen the news recently, you'd have seen ministers walking with JetBlue people, American Airlines. The border will be open. All we have done is lay down conditions for the entry of passengers. The border will be open. But if you want to come in, you have to meet these criteria. Yeah? And of course, by that I mean the authorized airlines that are authorized to come into the country.
The border is confirmed to be open in the next 2 weeks. Beaches are closed for now. Rivers are locked down for now. What incentive is any foreigner getting to come to Trinidad and Tobago?
Our border is open, and who has reason to come here will find a reason to come, and when they come, they'll meet the door open on the terms laid down by the CMO. Right?
Prime Minister, there are complaints of price gouging. People are making complaints about price gouging at some supermarkets. What is your position on such claims, and does the government have any intentions at this time to maybe act on some of those claims if they are proven to be accurate?
I have not heard that. As a matter of fact, to the best of my information, the food supply from supermarkets and the Supermarket Association has been very cooperative in working with the government on the vaccination program. And if one or two people are going to do things like that, let us not let them be the yardstick by which we measure the whole arrangement. I did mention here a while ago the question with the cement, and the comments I made then are applicable to food if the same thing is happening there. But you know what people do, they try to get more than their fair share, they try to utilize the opportunity. But I have not really had news of any significant price gouging with respect to the food supply. Right? As a matter of fact, what I did hear is that some of the fresh food supply, which is quite good, and that the prices are holding, and some of them have even gone down a bit. Okay? Thank you all very much, and you have a few more, one more.
Well, send it on to the health professional.
No, after this, that's the end of the press conference. Yeah.
Minister of Health or the CMO, anyone?
You have one more question. Let's hear the question, and
there are reports coming out, I think last night or night before, of an outbreak in the Scarborough Hospital of COVID. Could we address that?
Okay, so I spoke to the Secretary of Health, Wellness and Family Services this morning on that specific issue. She has advised me there is no outbreak of COVID at the Scarborough. What they do have is a small cluster. And any further details, you can pose that to the Secretary of Health, Wellness, but she told me categorically, if that is asked, there is no outbreak, but there is a small cluster.
Sure. That same issue. Listening to the newscast, it was said that one of the doctors was given a positive result whilst working. So even after she was tested, he didn't quarantine at home. Could you address that as well?
So I wouldn't have that granularity. I would suggest that you pose that to the officials in Tobago.
Right, so thank you very much. Let me end by thanking our healthcare givers and all those who are required to ensure that the population is guided. to a place of improvement, our security services, our suppliers of all kinds, and those who are working on the vaccination program. And finally, I want to thank my colleagues in CARICOM for their support during this period. It was not easy, but somebody had to do it. I wish I had a bit more help in Trinidad and Tobago, but it was CARICOM, and I did get quite a bit of help from my political colleagues outside of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you all very much, and let's continue to face down this challenge.